Today on the Haverford 7 show, I have John Ryan, a local realtor. Now, I've been talking to you about pressures that we have that are potentially risks for our taxes going up. We talked about underfunded pension. I'll put a link in the blog post back to that original post. We've been talking about the increase in debt that the township, is financing for the new construction of an administration police building. But now we're talking about something that I think people have a weird sense of, they've heard of, they've maybe run into, but they don't realize what the potential impact is on them and on their tax rate. So we're talking about the way properties get assessed in Haverford Township, but really in the county as a whole, right?
Basically, yes, assessment on new development
Right.
within the township.
Right, and I know from conversations with people, and until I started talking with you about this, I didn't really have a clue exactly how it worked, other than the fact that, hey, everyone seems to know that a new construction property in Haverford Township is going to have a much higher tax rate than, just selling my current home that is not new construction. But that's about where the conversation stops. It's just sort of an accepted fact, but there's no real conversation about, well, why is that?
Yeah,
so why is that, John?
That's a good question, Mark, because quite honestly, state law says to us that our taxes have to do with our market value. So
Right.
new construction market value and an existing property market value aren't any different. They're market values.
Right. And so you've been crunching some numbers that we've been talking about before we started here. So it isn't just that, new construction is $200,000 more than my current house, therefore it's taxed more. And that, because I think sometimes that's the gut level impression is, well, yeah, of course, that's a more expensive house. No, we're looking now apples to apples, looking at these were the prices of X number of new construction homes, and then looking at a set of existing construction homes with the same sales prices, right?
Exactly.
Right. And they're not taxed the same at all.
They're not taxed the same at all. I mean,
or assessed and therefore taxed.
Well,
yeah.
just to be current, I took the last 12 months of data for single home new constructions and compared it to the last 12 months of data for existing home new constructions in the same price range.
Right.
And just to kind of sum up these numbers quick and not to lose everybody, but
Right.
we had 15 single new home constructions.
So brand new houses that were bought and sold.
And these are the single homes, 15.
Right. Okay.
And those price ranged between $440,000 and about $610,000.
Okay.
So I went back and I found the houses that were sold in the township between $440,000 and $610,000 that were single home properties,
Right.
and there was 25 of them.
Okay.
I crunched the data, and the assessments on those 25 properties ended up to be around 44.5% of the value of those properties.
Okay.
Our problem is that the county goes and assesses our new construction and our new development. They come in at an assessment rate higher than 80% and allow what's called an interim appeal, where they allow the people to sign off for their first appeal, where it brings it down to what's called the common level ratio. And the common level ratio is a ratio set up by the state that says for this county, the total sales of property values compared to their assessed values is, for this year, 67.5%.
Okay.
So basically, our new constructions are being assessed after appeal at 67.5%. Our existing constructions are about 44%.
So that therefore results in this much bigger tax.
Well, they're 50% higher.
50% higher.
Because basically, you're talking about 22% higher. 22% higher of 44% is 50%.
All right, so let's cut to the punchline, though, which is like, so what? Why do I care as a resident in Haverford Township? Hey, that's somebody else's problem. That's the new construction. So we've been talking about the fact that the ticking time bomb is that built into the law is this trigger that would cause a complete reassessment if the disparity gets too big. And what you've been telling me is that the disparity's already been too big. And really, the county has basically said, well, we're not going to worry about it until somebody forces us, and somebody is about to force them.
There's a group of builders that have already started a lawsuit against the county.
Right.
To basically force a reassessment.
So now, I live here in Haverford Township. If that's the way this goes, there's this cross-the-board reassessment. Again, you've crunched the numbers. My taxes are going up. I mean, most people, it looked like a pretty big ratio of people's taxes are going to go up in that process.
Here's the interesting part. There's something called the anti-windfall law.
Right.
That basically makes sure that the taxes stay the same for the total amount that the township
Right.
or the school district or the county collects.
So the total number that's in the budget has to stay the same, but my piece of that total as a homeowner doesn't necessarily stay the same.
We're figuring out the new values.
Right.
Now the problem is, Mark, since we've been gouging redevelopment, basically overtaxing them, their taxes are really, really high. I just told you they're 50% higher.
Right.
So what will happen is when we close the gap, anybody that's bought new and has been gouged for years,
it's going to come down.
Their taxes are going to come down significantly.
And everyone else's is going to come up, but not as dramatically.
Not significantly, because obviously there's a lot more existing properties.
Absolutely. It's spread across many more houses, but it's an upward pressure. And, most people are not looking to have their taxes go up.
Looking forward to that happening.
Especially when you throw that on top of the pile of the other pressures that we've talked about in terms of the underfunded pension situation and the increased debt burden that is already going up and already threatens, because there's no other sources of new revenue on the horizon. So bottom line is this pressure could be addressed differently if it weren't just kind of going this way, right? If our Board of Commissioners were pressing the county to say, hey, wait a minute, we could have this other system, because not everyone does it this way, right? You were just telling me.
I've been to...
It's different in Montgomery County.
It's different in Montgomery County. I went up to Norristown and talked to their assessors and basically laid out how Delaware County was doing it, and they kind of chuckled at me because they said, well, yeah, because quote, they said basically, and if you know your geography, that there's big difference, but there's a much bigger difference between a Gladwin mansion and a Norristown row.
Right.
So they don't assess them the same.
And we've got the same situation. There's a very big difference between a single home in the midst of Haverford Township and a row home in Chester, right?
Correct.
I mean, they're nowhere near each other's price values.
Correct. And our original assessment was from 1998. Like those row homes in Chester County in 1998 were worth $50,000. This year they might be worth $40,000,
right?
Which is a big problem. So their ratio is somewhere around 120%.
So the bottom line of the money dynamics is that the way this is happening right now in Delaware County kind of pulls down growth and development at the upper end in order to
pay for the lower end.
Carry the lower end, and essentially what that does over time though is stifle growth. So let's look at what it could look like differently if there were less of a disproportionate gouging of new construction. There would be more new construction potentially. There would be more turnover, which would result in increased transfer tax to the township.
Increased transfer tax.
Because every house that's sold, the township gets 1%, right?
Yep.
So if we double the number of new homes that are sold,
you're increasing your transfer tax on that list that I just told you about by $80-some thousand.
Right. So there's a chunk of money that comes into the township by not gouging the assessed value and having more turnover, more fluidity, more movement. Now, the other impact, of course, is more new construction starts to raise
everybody
all
else's
boats.
Values.
So my house goes up in value if a new house is constructed and sold that's, has a higher net value. The whole neighborhood starts to come up a little bit. I might find that I've suddenly got more equity in my house.
Yeah.
And so I'm feeling a little more flush, a little less pressured, even if a reassessment resulted in a little bit more, of a tax burden to me, it would be made up for by the increase in my equity. I wouldn't feel so bad, would I?
No, not at all. And it would go to help a lot of different people that because of the housing bubble, around 2008 popping, that they're considerably underwater. We've really got to go about bringing the values back up to where they were at that point so people aren't trapped.
Right, because for years now, people have been feeling incredibly stressed about the fact that their value has been stagnant. Even if you're not underwater, you've got limited amounts of equity. That means if somebody had a great job that was perfect for you that's another state away or something like that, you have to turn down that job because you can't sell your house because you owe money at settlement. Right?
Or you let it go and just lose
which is a disaster for all your neighbors.
And it's a disaster for everybody because at that point it's a foreclosure, it goes for less, and it goes back into this ratio that keeps on staying high for us as a county.
So bottom line, we have something that's been happening for a very long time. It creates a pressure. We've already passed that threshold where this kind of trigger for reassessment could happen pending, the pressures of a lawsuit or something like that. It's kind of inevitable that it's going to happen one way or the other.
It'll definitely happen at some point.
And the bigger fight that isn't happening is for the township to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, we don't have to have this system be this way. We could have different tax authorities have the authority to tax at the rates that make sense for their township, right?
What we need is the assessment officers that are in the county that are assigned to our township to assess at our ratio,
right,
not the county ratio.
Not this blanket county ratio,
which
treats everyone the same from Chester to the upper end of the
Mark,
county.
I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that's saying it's counterintuitive right now. We're getting more money from the new construction. But quite honestly, my experience is that for every new construction I sell now, I could have sold 5 other ones in that process. But it takes a much longer time to sell that property.
Right.
We wait for that transfer tax. We wait for that revenue. Whereas we could be lining people up to develop new properties. Right. Some of our older properties that we look around, you may drive around and see an old dilapidated property. Well, maybe they own a lot of money on that property, and they're not willing to sell it yet because they owe so much.
Yeah, and they can't afford to fix it up and stay.
They can't afford it, but a builder or developer or somebody that wants to rehab it would be much more willing to make that plunge and maybe give them a little bit more money.
Sure, because they're going to deeper pockets to kind of do that and make it happen.
And they're raising the values because now if we don't have this unequal tax burden on new construction, we're going to get more competition for new construction. We're going to start competing with neighborhood townships like Lower Merion that's in Montgomery County, where I watch their values skyrocket. But I'm also seeing a lot of people that kind of want to be over there that end up over here because we have much better values here.
So bottom line is, if we could fight to have those assessments done in a fair and equitable way in this township, you'd be ultimately making more on new construction because you'd have more new construction, you'd have more turnover of that new construction, you'd have more transfer tax happening, and with more properties, even at a lower assessment, you're still going to be making more money, right?
And not to mention all the jobs you create from that, Mark.
Jobs for the people who are working on all these developments, and increased equity in the homes as neighborhoods' values rise faster, whereas right now they're stagnated and dragged down by the lower value ends of the county. So in the end, this makes a lot of sense. It's a little complicated. It's easy to get lost in the numbers, but that's the bottom line. The bottom line is we have something that is going to get triggered at some point that at the moment is going to cost people money and doesn't necessarily have the forward thinking or the planning that would allow us to actually make it into something that is increasing revenue, increasing property values, decreasing the pressure on everyone's taxes from these other threats that we've already talked about. So.
Yeah, basically, and we need and one of the groups that can obviously appeal taxes are taxing authorities. And our taxing authorities locally are our Board of Commissioners, who impose our township tax and put together our budget tax, and our school board. So quite honestly, if they were to appeal these, not the individuals, because the county can fight the individuals, but if one of their 67 municipalities stood up and said, whoa, we're doing this all wrong. We need to do this the right way so that we can develop more.
And better yet, if the Board of Commissioners and the school board
went
did that simultaneously, that would be kind of a little more clout.
But I've approached my commissioner, I've approached a couple of the commissioners about doing this, and they don't want to step up to the county.
Well, maybe there's something we can do about that.
Yeah, so I would hope so.
I appreciate you being on the show today, helping to explain some of this. I think it's a really important issue that people don't understand very well. It's kind of a silent pressure that's on top of these other pressures. I don't want to pay more taxes. I'm sure you don't want to pay more taxes. I'm sure you'd like to see the revenue increase, which helps the entire real estate community, but it helps the entire community.
It helps the entire community.
I'd like to have more equity in my house. That's for sure. So appreciate you talking to me today and sharing this with everybody. And I'm sure we'll have you back to, hey, post questions, whatever confused you about that. Let's do follow-ups and really make people understand this issue.
No problem.
It's important.
Happy to post the spreadsheet after the fact of the data that we talked about so that people can look at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next time then. Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you, Mark.